of our men-to-men prostate support efforts, and a special guest today to talk a lot about some of the things that face all of us. And without getting into it too much, I'll let Chad describe his own background and his father's background. Is a big part of the process and the story here. He's got a great book, by the way, and I'm showing it to you now, and I hope you can see it. Oh, where's the camera? We don't have
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The book is called Blind Vision, and I've got access to copies of it, so let me know if you'd like a copy. The story is really phenomenal. It's about Chad's dad and how he overcame some pretty severe issues, in great part due to the Vietnam War and its great effect on many, many men and many others. But let me let Chad tell a story. Chad Myers is here. He's with us. He's been very kind and generous to give of his time with us. So I'll turn it over to you, Chad.
Right on. Well, hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm happy to be here. So this is exciting. So I do a lot of talks on what's called post-traumatic growth. And it's actually a term that was discovered by Dr. Richie Tedestrian from North Carolina. And that's basically resilience. It's anti-fragility, meaning we bounce back even higher after adversity. That sometimes difficult things happen and we have to learn to bounce back. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I am a former school teacher. So you will see my framework here. You'll see a lot of educational frameworks to get this thing started. I can't seem to advance my slideshow here.
Just having our normal technical issues of the day. Bear with us for a second.
Adversity.
Adversity.
We just tested everything and it all worked out perfectly, but now let's try it again. There we go. So we're going to talk about our stories, why stories matter. We're going to talk about the blind vision story, my father's story. We're going to talk about embracing a growth mindset, and then embracing your story, because we all have a story. Then we're going to talk about how to get unstuck, these behavior patterns that kind of get in the way. We have a little Q&A at the end. So before I get started, I would like to invite you guys into the blind vision story and to connect you. Now, if you're comfortable, if you would, for just a few seconds, I invite you to close your eyes so that you can kind of connect with my father's story. And as you get your eyes closed, I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from the book and share a little bit about my dad's background. And then when I tell you to open up your eyes, you can. Again, if you're comfortable, it's an invitation. You don't have to if you're not comfortable with it.
Absolutely.
So my father shares that on April 26, 1967, he was new to the country of Vietnam, and he was on a search and destroy mission. He was in Cu Chi, which is one of the most bombed, war-torn areas out of all the wars. And my dad says, "We don't know what we have until it's gone. Sunsets melting over the horizon, white caps on Lake Michigan, the grinning faces of your family, vivid images of life that we all take for granted. I had 20/20 vision when I arrived in that hot, humid country full of lush green trees. I just didn't know how little time I had left." It was yet an oppressively hot day in the monsoon season as we headed northwest. We're just coming out of the jungle, and I used my machete to cut down a pineapple. My gun hit a red ant's nest, and I removed my helmet. As we rolled through the trees, a memory from ambush school flitted through my mind. Never pull into the shaded areas, a commonplace for the enemy to plant landmines. "Lonnie," I said, "don't pull in between those trees." Boom. The lights went out. My life as I knew it was over. You may open up your eyes. So my father was flown out of the jungles into the field hospitals, and he woke up with patches on his eyes, shrapnel all over his legs and all over his body. And he had no idea what had happened. And at this time, he had no idea he was permanently totally blind. No one shared that with him. He was flown back to the States. And when he was brought back, he went to Valley Forge and then basically was sent to Hines VA Hospital. And that's when they told him, they gave him a cane. They said, you are going to be blind, young man. He was 19, 20 at the time. Actually, he's 21 because he said he had a beer at his 21st birthday at the hospital. And they said, you're going to be blind the rest of your life. And he was angry. You can imagine it, age 21. That's my mother and my grandmother. My mom's pregnant with me. And my dad decided that he was going to have to deal with this. And he didn't know how. One of the things that my dad mentioned is that if it wasn't for my mom, he probably wouldn't have made it. I want to read something real quick, another excerpt from the book about my mother and what she did for him. My wife Christy came and stayed with me for a few weeks to help me through my fears. I was afraid to go to the bathroom. I was afraid to walk anywhere. I was afraid of everything. What made matters worse was that there was constant moaning I heard from a 3-star general who was saying, I'm dying, I'm dying. My terrified little child was back. Despite all the meds pumped into my body to eliminate my suffering, the only thing that really relieved my pain and fear was my expectant wife sitting next to me, holding my hand, supporting me emotionally. I was beginning to learn the touch of another caring human being was very important to my healing, as it is for all of us. You can appreciate that he said, I couldn't go about it alone. I needed somebody else. I needed another person to help me through this. Because he said, I didn't get over things, I had to get through them. What he shared is that as he was at Hines VA Hospital, and you're going to see some themes throughout the book and throughout the story, is that my dad was introduced to mentors. Mentors showed up. People showed up in his life. A World War II Vietnam vet showed up, blind. He says, this guy was old enough to be my dad. His name was Milt Joe. He said, it's the closest thing I ever had to a father who understood me. Milt was full of life. He was full of gusto. He said he was charming. He was great with the ladies. He taught my dad that life isn't over, young man, as a blind man. He said, if you like, I can give you some shortcuts. I can help you out. He said, acceptance. He said, the more you accept your blindness, the more you accept where you're at, the easier it's going to be. A lot of surrendering, a lot of letting go. So my dad began to say, okay, fine. If I'm going to be a blind guy, I'm going to be the best damn blind guy there is. I'm going to be the best version of myself. So it became a competition to him. And as he was going through Hines, he went from being afraid to go to the bathroom to crossing 4 or 5 lanes of traffic in downtown Chicago with a cane.
Is that where Hines is?
Hines is in Chicago, yeah. So this is how he got through it, is he said, I'm going to be the best version of myself. And because of Milt, his mentor, he said, Milt was like, he just really helped me through this process. That was his first mentor. My father, this is a picture of my dad feeding me, and that's a picture of my parents. And my dad describes, he said, when I first got back from Hines VA Hospital, I felt like a caged lion. He said, I was trapped in my house, I was collecting disability, and I couldn't stand it. He said, I could not stand sitting in my home. So the first thing he did is he went and exercised. He joined a men's fitness club. Because what we know, there's a Dr. John Arden. I had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Arden on stage one day, and Dr. Arden shared that exercise is more powerful than antidepressants and therapy combined. So my dad, I don't know how he knew this, but he got his butt into a gym, and he started hanging out with other guys, and the other guys were like, we really respect you for what you're doing. Like, we think that we should have the local newspaper come in and do a story. So they did. And that's the clipping from the newspaper. And that particular evening, a gentleman by the name of Denny Floden from Fenton, Michigan, picked up the Flint Journal and started reading about my dad. So this is his second mentor that showed up. I've had Denny and Dad on stage together. Those two are pretty interesting. Denny's 85. My dad now is 77. And Denny was, again, another mentor. Denny wasn't really sure how to handle my dad. He was very moved by the story, and he came out and interviewed him. He said, I'm from the Mass Mutual, and I'm a recruiter, and I'm a general agent. I think we might be able to interview you to see if you'd be good at this job. He went back to the office, and he says, I'm not really sure why I gave this blind guy false hope. I hope he goes away. So my dad, at that time, he got there was pre-licensed books. I don't know how many books that he had to read. And so we went to the Federation for the Blind. He got this all on tape and started listening to the study material. And he called the guy up and he said, I'm ready to take the test. He said, you're kidding. He says, come on in the office. And my dad was able to answer the question before he finished the questions. So at this point, Denny, he said something inside of him, he wanted to help champion my father. He said, I want to help this guy. So he called the state of Michigan and he says, I have a gentleman I'd like to take a test. But we're going to need someone in the room to read the test to Mr. Myers because he doesn't have eyeballs, he can't see. And they said, wait a minute. No one's in the room is allowed in the room except for the proctor and the test, people taking the test. That's impossible. And he says, ma'am, let me try to save you. He says, you talk to your boss, you ask your boss if I'm going to contact every local TV station, radio station there is in Flint, Lansing, Detroit, and I'm going to tell them that you're denying a Vietnam vet to take a test. If your boss is okay with that, let me know. Hour later, they called back and said, I think we can accommodate. My dad got a 92 on his state exam, and he then became able to take the rest of the training with the Mass Mutual. And he was the first blind man ever hired by Mass. And there's a particular award that Mass Mutual has every year for all rookie agents called a Freshman 5. My dad started asking about this, and they said, well, no one from the office has ever won a Freshman 5. It's kind of a difficult award to receive. He said, well, if no one in this office ever won it, he says, I guess I'll be the first. And he said, they don't really have any, records for blind guys, do they? So my dad ended up winning the Freshman 5 Rookie of the Year. He finished number 2 in the nation. And everybody was like, how is this possible that a blind guy could be that successful in the insurance business? Now, this is back before, the disability acts and back before all the modern day technology. So my dad would say things like, David, would you look on page 3? Let me borrow your eyes for a moment. Look on page 3 and read this out to me. Tell me what that says, right? And so he would work with clients. And what this did is my dad shares that he said, I really felt like I wanted to make a difference. I needed meaning and purpose in my life. I wanted to serve other people. He had to get vulnerable. He had to get courageous. He had to be willing to make a lot of mistakes, fumble around. And he tells me, there's all kinds of stories in the book about my dad's first couple of years of all the silly mistakes he made as a blind guy inside the world. But it didn't stop him. And so what we're now talking about is my dad began to grow through his adversity. And somehow, some way, my dad not only did he become successful in the insurance business, they asked him to please speak at Ford Theater, and he was presented an award for the late Paul Harvey. And he spoke in Detroit amongst 3,000 people. And from there, my dad began to, people started asking him to come around and speak, so he became a motivational speaker. And then his mentor, Milt Joe, the World War II mentor, said, Howard, what did you do before you lost your eyesight that you really loved to do? He says, I love water skiing. He said, put those back on. He said, I want you to live life with gusto. You're not dead, you're blind. So my dad put on the water skis, and I watched my dad slalom water ski across the lake as a little boy sitting in the back of the boat. I thought that was normal. I thought all blind guys were skiing. What you see there's my dad. He's got a home gym. He lifts weights. The picture on the right is my father and a gentleman by the name of Bobby Krim. Bobby Krim's a former Speaker of the House for the state of Michigan. He started a race called the Krim Fitness, or the Krim Foundation, and the Krim race is a big, huge national race known for all over the world, and runners come in from all over the world. And my dad called Bobby Krim. He goes, I want to run the 10-mile race with you. They said, well, Bobby's kind of busy. I guess I don't care. I want to run with the founder. So Bobby agreed to run with my dad. He was the first blind runner in this race. And my dad probably ran in over maybe 50 races throughout his lifetime. And so these are some of the things. And so what I like to ask people is, how can you grow personally? Like, what new challenge are you going to take on? Because when I hear like this story, people say it's so inspiring. Like, if a blind guy can ski, work, lift weights, run. My dad did judo. My dad did all kinds of things. Like, my dad would fly to Vegas by himself and get a cab and go to the casinos and get people to help him around. And then he would fly in to another city and do a talk. So he was a hell of a risk taker, and he just didn't take no for an answer. So what I've just kind of shown you is there's a term called, again, post-traumatic growth. There's also a very famous author and speaker, philosopher. His name is Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey. Have you guys ever seen Star Wars before? Most of the movies that we're watching are built around the hero's journey. So what happens is we have a normal life, we're going along, everything's going great. All of a sudden something happens. Cancer, divorce, disability, loss of a loved one, something happens, right? And we go into trauma, we go into suffering, we go into the abyss, and that abyss is really where we begin to rebuild ourselves. That's that spiritual part, it's that emotional part of us that is in some ways part of us are dying. In other ways, this is where we realize there's more meaning, there's more purpose in my life beyond what I used to know. And as you can see, my dad tells me that he's a much better human being as a blind man than he was as a sighted man. He said it changed his life to the better as far as becoming a better human being. And so he's taken this tragedy, this trauma, and he's turned it into a triumph. He's turned it into something better. And he became a better version of himself. As you see the mentor and the helpers, what happens is somehow they magically show up. How many of you have ever had someone kind of show up in your life out of the blue and help guide you through something? Everyone? Yeah, I've had people show up. In fact, there's people even on this call that's showed up in my life, and they become mentors and helpers and connectors. So as you can see, you go through that transformation, and now you go into the growth. So that's the model I wanted to show you. And then this is some of the challenges and some of the darkness. So the pandemic was very disruptive for most of us. And as a matter of fact, right now, there's a loneliness epidemic still. And during the pandemic, it kind of triggered all this. But as you can see on here, loss of health, which some of you, actually everybody in this room probably experienced that. But we've all been exposed to some of these things. What happens is when we go through traumatic events, it changes the circuits in our brain. And our brain actually doesn't function as well. And we begin to, we begin to become more negative, we become more upset, we become depressed, right? Trauma changes our brain. But the good news is that there's a term called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is how we can take our brain, actually we can take our mind and change our brain. So we are not our thoughts. We're not our brain. We have a conscious mind, And so we can begin to say, I'm going to change my life and I'm going to change my thoughts. And it comes to the power of choice. So it becomes our responsibility now. Well, not everybody goes through post-traumatic growth. Some people go the other way into post-traumatic stress disorder. So it is a choice. And what happens is we found out these positive experiences, neuroscientists are saying these positive experiences actually change our brains back. So some of these are, look at the top of the list, empathy, nurturing relationships, positive social connections. This group is powerful. Without each other, it would be much more difficult, right? Look at these up here, kindness, compassion. I have exercise up there. Some of the things we take for granted, like sleep even, these are all ways that we can heal ourselves, and it actually changes our brain for the good. Maslow said we either step forward into growth or backward into safety, right? And so my dad, even though he's blind, he was stepping forward into growth. He was constantly going out of his comfort zone, constantly doing things that were scary. Like getting on skis blind. I don't know if any of you ever skied before, but I have a hard enough time doing it sighted. I don't even know how, I can't even begin to imagine what it'd be like to ski blind. But so the growth mindset is really, it's when it's stretching yourself, it's sticking with things, it's not giving up, even when life is really challenging. That is really the hallmark of a growth mindset. And again, it's a choice. It's something that we can choose. I wanted to, because I'm really into the brain, really into neuroscience, what you see on the left-hand side is a happy, healthy brain. What you see on the right-hand side is a brain scan of somebody who's really struggling with life, who's depressed, anxiety, low work performance, low performance in general. And so what we know about the brain, especially if you want a growth mindset, we individually can all turn on dopamine and endorphins. Exercise is a way to turn on dopamine and endorphins. I can do that on my own, right? All of us can. But when it comes to serotonin and oxytocin, that's when we need each other. Oxytocin is a magical chemical that we get from each other. A hug, an act of kindness, touch, anything. Cuddling, oxytocin is called the cuddle chemical. That's when we actually start, and what we're seeing here on this brain scan is someone who has all these chemicals flowing through their brain. Serotonin's in the gut, so our gut health, again, nutrition, right? If we have a lot of anxiety, that serotonin is not being produced correctly, and it's actually not going to give us what we need in our brain. So we need each other. We need to do things for ourselves, but we also need each other. So what happens, because what we find, no matter who I work with, people are always talking about they're stuck. How do I get unstuck? If I'm not functioning properly, how do I get unstuck? And Daniel Goleman said, look, managing your inner world is the single biggest factor to happiness, health, and wealth. So I think it's really important we learn what it means to manage that inner world. So we're not wired for long-term stress. Stress was on the safari, if an animal's being chased, it lasts about 60 seconds to 5 minutes, and then it's over. Either the animal survived, or it goes back into survival goes into homeostasis, or the animal is eaten, right? So as human beings, we go into long-term stress, then we actually begin to get into, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our brain for a minute. So this is a brain model that was created by Dr. Daniel Siegel. And if everybody wants, you can do this with me. So this is our frontal lobe. This is our midbrain. This is our brain stem. Have you guys ever heard of someone saying, oh my God, he flipped his lid. He lost his mind. So what happens when we get into chronic stress, we literally lose access to our frontal lobe, which is the CEO. It's the logic part of our brain. It's the decision maker. It's the goal seeker, right? So when we get too stressed, we literally lose access to the frontal lobe. We get stuck in the midbrain in the amygdala area, which is fear, anxiety. It's the more primitive part of our brain. So how do we do this? What do we do when we get like this? Because what happens, stress shrinks our brain networks. This is a lab rat, but you can see even a rat, the brain begins to, the brain pattern or the neurons in the brain begin to wither. So I want to do a little, because I used to be a school teacher, just do a little quick quiz here. So how much time exposure to distress would you predict it would take for the neurons to wither as shown? On the right-hand side is a stressed, withered neuron. How long does that take? Anybody want to take a guess?
Oh, boy. An immediate reaction could happen instantly. Stress,
Yeah.
when stress comes on, it comes on right away.
Yeah, and it doesn't take too long because the answer is D.
D, I was gonna say.
10 minutes a day for 5 days,
Mm.
and we begin to deregulate. So what do we do when we get stressed? So I like to call these anchors. Brings us back to safety, helps us with that inner focus. What I mean by anchors, I'll give you an example. One of my anchors is yoga. Yoga anchors me. Another one of my anchors is walking in nature. When I get stressed, if I'm not managing my stress real well, those things bring me back to safety. What are some of your anchors? What are some of the things that you do that helps you manage your stress?
Your Tai Chi class helps me.
Tai Chi, very good. What else?
Yoga's gonna become one of mine.
All right, David, I like that. You heard that, Ray. Ray's on there. David said he's going to yoga. What else?
Probably likes the
For
best
me,
driving.
working in
Long
the gardens,
distance.
working
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
the
gardens.
garden.
Yes, the blue zone, the people in the blue zones, that's one of their secrets to longevity is working in the garden. Yes, very good. What else?
I don't mind driving long distances, even in heavy traffic.
Wow.
It relaxes me.
Okay, so we're all a little bit different. That doesn't work for me. Jill says walking. Right on, Jill, thanks. Yeah, go ahead on the screen, share out. Some of you, how many of you have a dog or a cat?
Yeah.
Yeah? Petting your dog or a cat,
Absolutely.
oxytocin completely helps, cats purr. That helps us relax,
Yep.
right? It gets us back into safety. Anything else?
Human
I
contact.
think for
Yes, social connections.
Mm.
for me, artwork that's peaceful and serene and just evokes kind of a certain feeling of peace and quietness. And sometimes it helps me just look certain favorite paintings and things like that I have. And it brings back also a lot of recall, a lot of pleasant kind of memories.
Very good.
I find it very therapeutic.
Very good. Awe. So one thing is awe. Awe is basically when we go, wow, right? We see something like a beautiful sunset. They say if you take like a 20-second picture, just a 20-second picture in your mind, or just a 20-second being present, it creates awe. And that actually helps heal our brain. So nature heals. The Japanese have a term called forest bathing. And so just walking in nature automatically calms us down and changes our brain. So there's so many things that we can do, someone else trying to enter, that we can do naturally to anchor us. These are 4 anchors of well-being and peak performance, resilience. I talked a little bit about my friend, I call him Dr. Omar because his name's so hard to pronounce, but he said, Howard Meyer's powerful memoir is an illustration of what experts call post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon of people becoming stronger and creating a more meaningful life in the wake of staggering tragedy or trauma. They don't just bounce back, that would be resilience. In significant ways, they bounce higher than they did before, which is referred to as anti-fragility. So when we are struck with trauma, again, if you look in the history books, most of the people we read in the history books had unbelievable trauma and tragedy. Nelson Mandela, right? It's an example. We can name hundreds of them right now that we've read about in the history books. They had tremendous resilience. Positive mental attitude, generosity, and focused attention. these are things that really help us anchor us and help us with well-being. So I'm going to just pause for just a second and just say, look, your story, my story, everybody's story on here is a superpower. So we take our story, we can reframe it. We can say, okay, life isn't fair. Things happened to me that I had no control over. But when my dad shared that when I committed, when I decided that I was going to be the best version of myself, Providence moved too. People showed up, circumstances showed up, things kind of showed up out of the blue. I believe that that is that commitment, and then Providence shows up in our life. So what I want to do is, I love doing stuff like this with people, because my dad, the book is called Blind Vision, obviously kind of an oxymoron, but my dad said, I live in my mind now. He's like, I don't have the privilege of seeing out there, I see in here, and I visualize what I want. So my dad was visualizing skiing. My dad was visualizing going up on stage and speaking. My dad was visualizing, well, in the book, my dad actually missed driving, and so there's some things in here. We actually took my dad out driving before, let him drive, but that was on the back dirt roads. So, but he was visualizing, and so we talk about visionary living. And so, what do you think it means? I'm the master of my fate and I'm the captain of my soul, right? And so I want people to just invite you again to close your eyes for just a second. And I like to work in like 3 to 5 year increments. So if you could look 3 to 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now, what does that ideal life look like? If you were to wake up, what are you doing? Who are you with? What kind of adventures are you having? What are your relationships like? What are you doing? And so, and we know this to be true, that when we visualize things, even something as simple, I just had a conversation this morning with a lady that was an athlete in college, and she said, I remember them bringing all the athletes in, and they told us to bring our pillows and to visualize scoring. She was playing lacrosse, and there was other athletes like basketball players and golf, you know. So a lot of the Olympic athletes and professional athletes are visualizing. They're seeing it in their mind's eye first, and then they're going out. Even as simple as free throws. They've done studies. They take 3 groups. One group practice free throws, the other group visualize free throws, the other group doesn't do anything. The group that visualized the free throws did just as well as the group that practiced. So they were practicing in their mind. So I just want to encourage everybody to rethink their stories and to visualize, like, what do I really want? What's my next chapter? What does that look like? And people can reinvent themselves, and they have to just keep growing, because we're either growing or surviving. The brain has 2 primary jobs: growth or survival. And so that's when we have to start to kick in and say, I want to grow. We had a little problem with this video, but it's powerful. If we don't get audio, I'd like to at least share a little bit. On the left-hand side is this gentleman here. He was told he'll never walk again. He was a paratrooper, and he was in the military, and he just took too many hard jumps, and they said, never walk again. And he found somebody, a yoga teacher actually, that took him on. And he said, he's the only guy that believed in me. Everybody else said, you'll never walk again. So yoga teacher believed in him. I can play, you can see some of what I want to do is play some of this so you can see the struggle, the failure, the patience, the resilience that this man, he went through a transformation. He lost 140 pounds in 10 months, and he went from being in a wheelchair to starting to walk to beginning to run. And I don't think we're going to get any audio, but for illustrative purposes, I want to fast forward this and show you some of the struggles that this guy went through, and you can just doctors told him, I'm never going to walk again.
15 years.
Look at this.
Time he was diagnosed to
Yeah.
overcoming it.
All but one. See, it only takes one person to believe in us. That's all it takes, is one person to care, one person to believe in us. And what he's saying right now, that's his yoga instructor, his coach. And he said, man, I wanted to help this guy. He didn't know me, but he believed in me. So I want to just fast forward. He went through all of this yoga training to try to get his balance again, to try to get his legs to work. And over and over and over again, he's starting to lose the weight. He's starting to believe in himself. He's like, man, maybe I can do this. There he is falling down. He's trying to walk. He's falling. He's failing over and over again. Trying to balance on his head. He's going to flop and fall. But then he says, look, now he's getting stronger. Look, oh, I'm going to start walking now. They were wrong. Again, we apologize. We tried to troubleshoot the audio for an hour.
Yeah.
We didn't.
What was his, he motivated himself, but he obviously was motivated by this yoga teacher too.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Get the heck out of here.
I want you to look at this guy, because obviously when we first saw him, and at the end, not only you're going to see the physical, there was a whole trend. Now he looks like a whole other human being at the very end of this. He's got a haircut and everything, and I was like, wow, this is an HBIP, human being with infinite potential.
Mhm.
He looks 30 years younger too.
Exactly.
A lot younger.
Yeah. Same guy.
Wow,
Jeez.
really? Wow.
140 pounds in 10 months. So I just wanted to show you that because, again, it goes into belief. It comes into like, hey, what can I do? Who am I kind of a thing. Whoops. So that's me, and I'm a growth mindset and post-trauma growth expert. I am a speaker, educator, author, and my mission is just meet people and listen to their story. I love hearing people's story, no matter where I go. I don't care if it's a restaurant or a church or everywhere I go. I like to meet people and hear their stories, and then help them construct a new story and then walk with them to their destination. And here's the good and the bad and the ugly of today. 90% of information when we are in process of learning is lost within the first 30 days. This is why a lot of times school doesn't work, because we'll sit in school, but there wasn't enough repetition. So space repetition or space learning is far superior than, and again, I'm not saying this is a waste of time, but we're just getting into this. We're just learning, like hitting the tip of the iceberg. And so space repetition or shock. My dad says you don't have to get your eyes blown out to change. But here's what we know. One of my good buddies is a psychologist, and he says, men are way more stubborn than women, and it takes a divorce or some kind of a disease or illness to wake us up before we begin to say, oh boy, I better change. Right? And so, unfortunately, we're often stubborn. We have to, we've got to be tough and macho, right? But the research is saying now more than ever that we need each other. We can't go about it alone. Even when the POWs, they talk about the TAP code. They said that if it wasn't for them doing the Morse code in the in the POW camps, they were tapping. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this. I care about you. Think about your family. Picture your family. Visual. 7, some of them were in there for 7, 9, 10 years or longer. And they said that because of the connection, because of the TAP code, because of support of the men in the POW camps, they had a much lower PTSD than combat veterans because of that support that they had with each other. So that's what I have for today. But we can open up for Q&A.
Well, yeah, first of all, I think you deserve a round of applause for
Thank you.
really interesting material, boy, I'll tell you. I mean, your end point here where we only learn things for 30 days sort of tells me, you know, we need to repeat every so often to refresh our minds and our mindset on the whole notion. But so much of what you talk about applies to all of us.
Well, hi, everybody.
Hey,
Nice job, Chad.
Hey, Ray.
there he is live. Nice to
There's
see you.
Jill. Jill's a friend of mine. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill. Good to see you all.
Okay, so questions, comments, stories. Go ahead. I'm open. I'd love to hear Q&A or your own story or some things. Maybe what was your takeaway? What was your aha?
So Chad, I would think that
Go ahead, Ray.
having grown up around your father must have been an early influence for you. It must have really shaped your entire life, your personality, your career. Having grown up watching your father, it must make you see the big picture more than the rest of us because you had to see him challenged on a regular basis.
Yeah, writing the book was an epiphany. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done and one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It was, yeah, but yeah, thank you, Ray. I think that it kind of gave me a whole different point of view. Yeah, you're right on.
You know,
I enjoyed your remarks, and David, thank you for having Chad in. I'm so glad that you were able to find time in your schedule, and I've heard such great things about your group, David, so way to go.
You know, thank you, Ray. I think Chad's hit on so many things that apply to all of us collectively as a group. But what to me it does is the moment that I took away, or the message I take away, is that we all individually do have our stories to tell, and we have a responsibility, in fact, to spread that story to other people beyond this group here. So if each one of us hits one or two other people, it really has an immense impact on the whole message. Because really, we're all about a message. We're about a message of supporting each other, the tapping, constant tapping, and we're about a message of letting people know that prostate cancer, among other cancers, is treatable. So let's let people know that. Let's let them know what the options are. So your story has an immense impact, I think, on our entire group.
Appreciate that. There's a chapter in the book called The Ripple Effect, and what we don't realize is that people actually came up and said, your dad's story changed my life. I know Jill actually is on there. Jill grew up in my dad's hometown, and she remembers my father coming home from Nam and how hard it was for people in the community. But I have some little stories in here the chapter's called The Ripple Effect. And everybody kind of shares out my dad's story, how it's impacted them, and then what they've done to share out to other people. And so trauma begets trauma, hope begets hope. And so, yeah, you're spot on about spreading our own stories, because people need to hear them. People need to hear our stories.
Yeah.
Chad, I just want to add that our whole town gasped together as a unit when we heard about your dad's accident. And it's a perfect example of like a bow and arrow. You have to pull that bow back, and he went back. But when he let go, it thrust him forward into places that he would have never gone if this accident didn't happen to him.
Yeah. Well said, Jill. Thank you.
Yeah. Is the road race still going? The one that?
Yeah, it's in August. My dad doesn't run it anymore, but Jill just got up. Oh, Jill, isn't it at the end of August? It's in Flint, Michigan. So yeah, I know at one time they had 15 to 20,000 people running that race. My dad was able to meet world-class runners from all over the world. He's hanging out with the guys from Kenya that are running these
Marathon.
yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. And he never would have done that if he hadn't got out and taken those risks. That's what I said about his buddy Milk Joe. He said, Howard, live life with gusto. Don't just sit back and sit in your home and collect your disability check. And my dad didn't disappoint him. My dad actually still, unfortunately, he's aging and he doesn't do as much as he used to, but my dad has a track that he had built. And I thought my dad was I said, Dad, he's like, I'm gonna run alone someday. I'm like, okay, sure you are. But he said, no, I visualize it. I'm like, okay. So the next door neighbor, Vietnam vet, and one day he came and knocked on my dad's door and he says, Howard, I know you like to walk and run. He says, I want you to come with me. My dad has 22 acres and he has an open field. So this guy took his Clydesdale horses and plowed out a quarter-mile track in the middle of the field. And then in the center, he put this big, tall pole, metal pole. At the top, he connected a strong fishing line and a hook and a swivel and pulled that line all the way out to the edge of the track and put a handle on it. Let's grab a hold of that. And so my dad's starting to walk around the track, almost like an elephant or a horse, walk around by himself. Eventually, he went from walking to running by himself on his track. I've got video footage. Matter of fact, last summer I went out there, and he's in mid-Michigan, and I closed my eyes, grabbed a hold of that handle, and for about 10 or 15 steps, I was able to keep my eyes closed, but then it was too much. I couldn't do it. I was like, what if I fall? What if, it just was so awkward. So it just really helped me gain perspective of how much anxiety and fear you have to overcome to do something like that. And it just gave me a whole different perspective. But he also has a pool. He walks laps in the pool. He has a gym. It's called Howie's Gym. He, again, visualized like you'd get rides to the men's, fitness club, and he got tired of asking for rides, so he had a barn, and he's like, I could actually put a gym in my barn. So we hired a guy to renovate his whole barn. Now it's called Howie's Gym. He's got speakers in there, and futon, and weights, and treadmills, and all kinds of stuff. So he is really and then he had sidewalks put in his back property so he could walk to his pond, he could walk to his pool by himself. So again, that whole visualization piece and getting out of his comfort zone.
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, this is Jim. I'm sitting here in the dark, so I'm kind of with your dad, I got a little statement, and then I got a question for you. When I was first diagnosed, I relied on something that I always relied on to get through things. Going into the service back when the draft was on, I had to take the bar exam, the stress that went along with that, and there were many things that I just relied on my sense of humor. And I always saw something funny out of it, and funny enough to even tell a story on. So that's my story. What was the funniest thing your dad ever said after he had his accident?
That's a great question. Well, it's so. I'm going to read something real quick because this is his mentor that hired him. Tells a story, and I thought it was hilarious. It's called Thanks for the Mentoring. Howard has been somewhat generous in calling me his mentor. I take great pride in having been a part of his life and helping him become such a success. As the assistant general agent for Mass Mutual, it was my job to recruit and train new agents. Therefore, in many respects, I was just doing my job. When I hired him, it quickly became evident to me I had no idea how to best guide, teach, train, or mentor a blind person before total panic set in. Howard saved the day by telling me, I don't want to be treated like a disabled blind guy. Treat me as if you would any other recruit. So I did, partly to honor his request, partly because I didn't have a clue how to do it. Thanks for helping me out, Howard. Having completed the highest level of national championship teams while at the University of Michigan, go blue, I felt I understood the concepts of setting goals, hard work, and determination. Howard provided me with a whole new dimension. Thanks, Howard. By example, he also helped me grow and overcome some hang-ups regarding my own unhappy childhood. I heard him saying, I cried and cried because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. Watching Howard overcome his obstacles made my childhood obstacles seem rather small in comparison. Thanks, Howard. I needed that lesson. His grit and determination was inspiring. I should also thank Howard for eliminating a lot of time spent listening to excuses from other agents who were non-performers. It was difficult for other agents to come up with an excuse that had merit when the blind guy's succeeding and they weren't. So often they just didn't try. Many people are uncomfortable around those with disabilities. Howard's sense of humor is flat out charming and puts people at ease. One day he was at another agent's office on the ground floor that looked out over the parking lot, and he called up to my office telling me to hurry down. I ran downstairs and he told me to check out the pretty blonde and red convertible. When I asked how he knew the car was red, he snorted, I'm just blind, not colorblind. On occasion, I went to the office and stated that it was dark. I couldn't see because the lights were shut off. He said, I hadn't noticed, and he told me to turn them on. Aren't they on, he asked? When I told him they were, he said, damn, the lights never work for me, it's still dark. Thanks for the laugh, Howard. And thank you for saving the agency all that money from the utility bills. He also showed me how to better connect with my customers by listening and getting them involved. I would show up with a beautifully prepared multi-page presentation and wonder why the customers didn't buy when I knew that was the best option. Howard would show up with a pen, a yellow legal pad, and a rate book and guided the customer into running down their needs, wants, and desires. When the amount of insurance needed was determined, the customer would look up the rate, calculated the premium, and bought something. Thanks for teaching me how to better listen and involve the customer. Thanks for the privilege of being your mentor and friend. Howard, I hope you learned as much from me as I did from you. Not only have you been a great friend in my life, by being who you are, you are my mentor as well. Denny Floden, Captain Fogg Enterprises, 7-time hot air world balloon champion. Denny, the reason how I ended up down here is Denny was on Anna Marie Island. And I came down, I said, I'm writing a book about my dad, and I'm dedicating the whole chapter 7 to you and my dad. He's like, come on down to God's waiting room. So I came, and he's super funny. And that's how and he told me stories, like my dad would walk into like a hardware store, and he wanted to talk to the business owner, and he knocked all the shit off the shelves, tapping the cane, he's knocking everything all over. And they says, what do you want? He goes, my name's Howard, and I'm here to talk to you about your insurance needs. He said he also walked into a brand new business. They had just painted it. And he walked in, he had a brand new suede jacket, and he rubbed it against the walls, and he had paint all up and down his arms. And the guys felt so sorry for him that they bought insurance from him, of course. But yeah, Dad's sense of humor really helped. There's stories in here too about one of the things he missed. He says, I missed 3 things the most: sunsets, seeing my family's faces, and driving my cars. And so there's a story in here about he talked to one of his high school buddies to taking his car out, and my dad got in the driver's seat, and he was operating the gas pedal and stuff and brake, and his buddy was driving from underneath with the steering wheel, and they were in downtown where they were at, and a police officer was right next to them, and he says, "Howard, there's a police officer right there," and he goes, "How you doing, sir?" And my dad waved at him. Of course, he probably didn't know he was blind, but so yeah. And there's other stories in here too and there's some stories we need to leave out because it wouldn't be rated PG. So, great question.
Humor.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Yeah, mentoring is really something you feel that you could even just touch one life, and that will enrich your life tenfold. But I have a perfect example, actually. I have a younger brother who had Down syndrome, and he passed away on his 7th birthday. So from that point on, I always had this affinity to helping other Down syndrome kids. I met this one little guy, Georges, who became I became his mentor, and I taught him how to ride a bike and swim and to play ball and to do all kinds of things that he wouldn't have done before. And now and I really love music, and I got him into music, and now he does a dance play. He's in a dance competition, and just the other day I was invited up to him. We got a great picture of it here, and if I could send it around to him. Just the other day, I had his picture appeared on the billboard in Times Square.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And this is little Georgie.
This is somebody that you mentioned?
Yeah, this is a mentor of mine.
That's amazing.
Just have to touch the screen. Well, that's George's little kitchen, but you can see it. You got to touch the screen to get it.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he was on the.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's my mentor. That's who I mentor.
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
just, you just have to do a little something, and you'll be amazed.
Absolutely, it's paying it forward. And what David and I and Ray, who's on there, and there's a couple other gentlemen here in Sarasota, we decided to put together a men's retreat. We want to do retreats for men and women, but we're going to do a men's retreat in January, and we're going to talk about men's health, men's longevity, leadership, some of the things that we talk about in much more depth. So if you guys, I'm sure Dave will keep you guys informed, and if you know of any other groups or any other guys that would enjoy this, or any other people, doesn't have to be men. I'm sorry you're over here by yourself, but if you know any other groups, let me know. I love sharing out the story. The book is available on Audible and Amazon, and I gave out all my books, and I have to order more. Otherwise, I'd have some here today. But if you want a copy, let David know, and we can ship some books here.
Hey, Chad.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Chad,
It's a great story, certainly.
I can sell this back to you for $10.
Right on.
$9.99.
I think I actually gave that to you for free, but that's okay. I'll buy it from you.
Chad, excuse me, Chad.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Denise. I'm a friend of Jill's, and Jill, thank you for inviting me, for sure. I got a lot out of your presentation, and it just goes to show, in terms of your dad's story, how someone's supposed mess can become an awesome message. And, looking at the man, Arthur, who was told he could not walk on his own, he could have believed that story, because that's the story he's being told. That's the story he's telling himself. He hears that voice. But yet he found one person who believed in him. And that's all it took to start that little seed of, wow, could I possibly do this? And it's so important to pass on that seed of inspiration to people, because that's what's going to help them disrupt that story that we all have, right? We all have it. And I just thank you so much for your presentation. It was awesome.
Well, thanks, Denise. And that was really well said. It only takes one, and somebody does plant the seed. And then it's up to us to decide, what am I gonna do with it?
Because we all have, you know, whatever our story is, at one point, there's a fork in the road. And you have to decide which way you're going to go. We don't have to believe what we're being told by other people as well as the story we tell ourselves. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I love your verbiage, the story I'm telling myself. That's Brene Brown. I love Brene Brown stuff because we're all making up stories, and we can actually change the story anytime we want. We can co-create with God, the universe, whatever you call your higher power. We can co-create and write a new story. Because I just don't believe that we were put on this earth to just survive. I think there's more to it than that, and it really goes down to purpose and meaning. We're here for a reason.
Oh yeah, and I do believe that those that go through the biggest trauma or conflict, you know, however deep your hole is, you gain your strength by climbing out of it. And that's where you now have the strength to inspire and motivate others. You know, my dad also had a story. He grew up in World War II in Austria, and his family lost everything. He saw lots of members of his extended family being killed, and he was able to come through that and work really hard to be a really great member of society, where a lot of his family took the other fork in the road. They couldn't. So, and my dad too, my dad wrote a book about his story, and it's amazing what we are capable of.
Yes.
We often don't know it until we achieve it.
Yes. Very well said. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think we all have a mission, in fact, you know, without it being a burden. It's just a mission of being able to give to others what we have in our own selves. Share with everybody you know.
Yes.
And people you don't know.
Yeah.
And who we don't know, yeah.
Whether they want to hear a story or not, you should tell them. Ray knows that. Ray and I like to get out in Sarasota and meet people and share out stories, but it's fun stuff. I don't know any strangers, so.
We have
Listen,
fun.
guys, thank you so much, everybody, for participating today. It was a great session. I certainly have Chad to thank for that.
Very good.
We'll keep in touch. We'll keep our eyes and ears open to further communication.
Yes.
For sure.
Thanks for having me. It was an honor. It really was. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much on screen and live.
Yep.
So, good stuff.
Well, have a good afternoon, everybody, and thanks. Thanks for joining us. Okay.
Okay, signing off.
Thank you. Bye-bye.